Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode of Boys Don't Cry. Actually, quote unquote, Boys Don't Cry. In the previous episode, I spoke about, is it really his fault? Is he really the monster? Or is he a product of cultural conditioning, generational upbringing, learning over the course of decades? We spoke about what brings a man to this point. Let's cross the bridge now over to abuse is happening. How do we hold abusive men accountable and how do we create paths to change? This is one of the most difficult tasks to accomplish. And I'm going to go through certain steps of what I believe based on some study, based on some education, based on some experience in terms of looking around me, speaking with different people, hearing stories, and watching dramas and movies, and just understanding people by far. So let's start with the profile of an abuser. Who do we have there? Abuse mostly is about control. It is not about anger. It is not about destruction. It is about wanting to exert and influence that control. That control can be in the shape of financial control, physical control, emotional control, sexual control, psychological control. It is about controlling other person or group of people's lives. So it is seldom anger. Anger purely is a manifestation of an ability to exert that control. When an abuser tries to exert control, but somehow is unsuccessful in being able to have that control over other people's lives, their systems, what they do, that is when abuse comes to the forefront. It is deliberate, it is patterned, and it is hidden. It can be hidden also. Now, what do we mean by deliberate, patterned, and hidden? Deliberate means, yes, I have learned over the course of last 20 years, I have seen how things are. I have been accustomed to witness how things can be. But now that I am in this position where I want to exert control and I am unable to have that control, whether it is a good thing or a bad thing, now I want to basically have that influence on people around me. So I am going to deliberately concoct a plan to go down this road of physical, mental abuse, financial, psychological abuse. It is intentional. There is planning. Maybe first time there is no planning. First time, maybe it's just impulsive. You're having a conversation, things get heated, that conversation turns into a discussion, discussion turns into an argument, argument turns into a loud argument, and that turns into some physical hand movement. And next thing you know is you grab something and someone gets hurt. Maybe first time it is not deliberate. But that is where the buck should stop. That is where it should be put an end to. But because it is not, now it becomes a deliberate pattern of abuse. It is hidden. It doesn't happen in front of other people. When it happens, there are not a lot around, probably just the immediate family members around. So there is a facade that is maintained in front of people outside the house, people outside the immediate surroundings, people outside of your family or extended family. And there is a pattern to it. As I mentioned, first time might not be deliberate, might be just impulse. After that, seeing the results of that action, then it might become patterned. Maybe it's every other day, maybe it's every other week, maybe it's every other month, or there could be trigger words, there could be trigger actions. There's a pattern now to this madness. So it is about the control and not just about the anger. Abusive men, abusive females also. It's not just about men that we're talking about, that they are the abusers. It is also females. So it's always about the control, not just about the anger or frustration. Now, whenever we talk about abuse and abusers and how to go about correcting that pattern or controlling that pattern or holding abusers accountable, you want to understand, identify, and realize certain myths about abusers. Well, he or she just needs therapy. Yes, they do need therapy, but one thing that we forget before we get to the point where he or she needs therapy, they need accountability, because accountability for the actions that they have just performed, the slap, the physical beating, uh, breaking the glass door, or traumatizing kids, traumatizing parents, traumatizing extended family members who were part of that party, traumatizing kids who were at that birthday party who are now traumatized because of this instance, this meltdown that they witnessed as a result of that trigger that caused that physical abuse. So we're talking about accountability before therapy, because just to say, oh, he or she just needs therapy, no. While therapy is a long-term marathon solution, accountability has to be there, because what accountability does is puts that person in their place. Bro, you've got to be accountable for your actions. That slap you just executed, that punch you just landed, that kick you just, demonstrated, that is not how things go down. Or that drink you just spilled, that is not how civil individuals interact. So you've got to be held accountable for that. And after that comes therapy. Now, another thing that we see, again, this time, I'm not just talking about subcontinental men or females. I'm talking about men in general. Since there are more men who are abusers than females, but I'm not going to generalize this. We're going to stick to abusers here, regardless of gender. And one of the myths is, oh, he was provoked or she was provoked. Well, you're an adult. You've lived through college. Even if you haven't lived through college, you've gone to school. You've worked with different individuals. You earn a paycheck. You are a thinking, feeling adult with your mental, physical, cognitive faculties working, functioning properly. You haven't had a drink, at least today or over the course of your lifetime, where you have become an alcoholic. So this reason that you use, oh, I was provoked, this reflects a defeatist approach, defeatist mentality. How weak can you be, unless you're a teenager, that you are going to say, just because I was provoked, I slapped my wife, or I slapped my husband, or I kicked my kid, or whoever the fact we're talking about. So blaming the victim, a hallmark, one of the biggest myths out there. That is a classic defeatist cultural um, manifestation of a problem that we have. Another instance where we do blame the victim, if you go back a few years ago, and even if it happens here in the United States, well, someone gets sexually abused. Well, the first thing we think of is what kind of clothes was that person wearing? What kind of um, scene that person was in. Was he or she at a party where there were drugs? Was that person involved with some alcohols or drugs or any such company? So we've got to break away from this blaming the victim mentality. He or she was provoked, or this is the kind of clothes they were wearing, this is the kind of language he was using, or he called me a pussy. He called me a wuss. No, Just because I slapped you does not mean that I can tell you that you provoked me. I need to be held accountable for my actions. Going back to before therapy comes accountability. And then, oh, but he or she is a good parent. Absolutely. Hands down, he or she can be a good parent does not mean that they will not be held accountable for that. Now, if they are an abuser, what kind of standards are they setting? Are they setting the kind of standards for their kids, for their grandkids, for their relatives that, hey, this is how an adult should behave with females or males, or depending on the gender that we are talking about here? No, that should not drive that conversation. And just because someone is a good father or a good mother does not mean that they cannot or they should not be held accountable for the abuse that they're perpetuating. So we've got to really move away from these myths that we have. Oh, I was provoked. Well, you're so sensitive that you were provoked. What a snowflake you are. So what we've done is we have identified profiles of abusers. So we have identified some myths. Now, how do we move forward from here? What can be done? Therapy for abusive men and, of course, women. What is possible? The possibilities. So we're talking about individual therapy. We're talking about group therapies. We're talking about couples therapy. We're talking about family therapy. So we're talking about different kinds of therapy sessions. One thing, regardless of whichever therapy session we talk about, one thing we absolutely need is we've got to separate symptom from root cause. Now, this is one of those things that teams in corporate environments, leadership in corporate environments, management in corporate environments also fails to understand. When there is a problem, when everything is going wrong, everyone starts looking at the symptoms. What we need to do is, what we want to understand is, how do we move from symptom identification to root cause identification? The journey from symptom to root cause, and more often in this case, abusers, abusive men, more so than abusive women, but we're talking about abusers. There is some form of generational trauma at play from childhood, from early childhood, from early teen years, from young adult years. There is some form of childhood trauma, generational trauma at play that may or may not be as strong as to drive every single action, but that may have some trigger sense there. So we want to understand, we want to have that journey from symptom identification all the way to root cause identification. And then once we have identified whether it is childhood trauma, whether it is a generational trauma that has been passed on in different forms and fashion over the course of generations, or it is something that just happened because of an event where this abusive mentality started to take place. So you want to identify that before we move forward with different therapy sessions. Now, another thing in this case we want to understand is how faith-based, religion-based counseling can also help. Another asterisk here is very important that we want to not misuse religious teachings, faith-based teachings to misinterpret abuse, to misdirect abuse. That is a trap that so many of faith followers fall into. At the end of the day, after all the conversations are done, every single human being needs to be treated as a human being. So that is very important that we understand. Part of therapy is to be able to understand that the person sitting next to us, person talking to us, is also a human being. So just because I disagree with you does not mean I have the right to disrespect you. We absolutely have the right to disagree with each other, but that does not mean that you're going to start calling me names, you're going to start abusing me, you're going to start cussing me out, you're going to start pulling out skeletons from the closet. No, there's a difference between disagreement and disrespect, and therapy can help with that. So we have to be very careful in terms of what and how faith-based therapy, religion-based therapy can be incorporated into broad spectrum therapy. It is a massive playing field, therapy, when we talk about therapy sessions. Could be cognitive therapy, behavioral therapy, PTSD. There are so many symptom-driven therapies, root cause-driven therapies that we can talk about. And I am not a professional in that regard. I'm going to leave these kind of conversations to psychologists, to psychiatrists, to psychotherapists, to doctors. So I'm just going to stick to more of a symptomatic and root cause-driven people's behavior driven details that I have observed based on empirical evidence that I've gathered. Now, another thing we want to understand is therapy, while helps an individual, an abuser, to move forward, it can also backfire. While most people may get benefit out of therapy, there are individuals, there are abusers who are going to utilize therapy, continued support, as a means of gaslighting victims, as a means of continuing that abuse. Oh, but you know what? I'm still in therapy. I still get mad. I cannot control myself. So it's not my fault. You know I'm going through therapy. You know I'm trying my best. You know I'm talking to my therapist. You were there. I just cannot control it. But when you say these kind of things, I just cannot control it. I cannot hear anything wrong. Well, fact of the matter is, it is not when we hear something right that we have to control our temper. It is when something is wrong that we have to control our temper. And that is where restraint comes into play. So, therapy going wrong when abusers use the fact that they are in therapy against the very victims to perpetuate the same abuse. Oh, I'm trying, but there's only so much I can try. You've got to give me some credit for trying. Absolutely. But if you're going to continue abuse, well, I'm going to call 911 and your place is in the lockup. And only then, once you spend that night or two in a local city's lockup, maybe then you will understand why it isn't a good idea to hit someone, hit your kids, hit your spouse, hit your partner, hit your parents, hit your um, helpers, or beat your pets. There are people who even subject their pets to abuse. This is a freaky world, man. So, therapy gone wrong. And then another way that therapy can be utilized is, well, he's just depressed. Oh, there are ups and downs, there are good days and there are bad days. So he's just depressed. And mostly we're going to see that behavior when we talk about abusive men. Going back to my previous video, we see this behavior from parents, relatives of abusive men. Oh, he's trying so hard. He's going through therapy. He gets depressed. You should not say things like this. You should also be careful. But if you know he's going to get mad, why do you say these things? Well, I mean, your son better control his hands. That's really it. He should be able to control his anger. If he cannot, well, there's a place called correctional facilities where he is going to be given maybe I mean, meals 2, 3 times a day. I have no idea. He's going to probably get some time to work out, mental workout, physical workout. He's going to do some labor, earn some bucks, and maybe do some reading, depending on the class of quarters he or she's going to spend time in. So you've got to be able to understand that. Now, we spoke about accountability when we started talking about this. therapy after accountability, or accountability before therapy. Now, what does that look like? It starts with taking ownership of your actions. So if I am being abusive, if I just hit you, I need to take ownership of that action. It's not that I am a bad man. What I did was my action of hitting you was bad. My action of getting physical was wrong. I need to be held accountable for that very action. I should not be presenting any blame, any excuse, any victimization, victim blaming. Shouldn't be saying, oh, but you said this. Well, I could have said this. The fact that I went ahead and boom, 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 boom is the reason we are in this mess now. So that's a start of what accountability looks like. Making amends, how to walk the walk. Now that I understand what I did wrong, what do I need to do to correct myself? Whether that be to control myself, whether that is to have what it used to be. Uh, it wasn't a Fitbit. Uh, a stress ball. You can utilize a stress ball to distract yourself. Um, Making amends also means you do not rely on the forgiveness of the victim. No. Oh, but do you forgive me? I do forgive you. Okay, everything's rosy and rainbows, glitter and gold. No. Even when you've forgiven me, I need to take certain actions to make sure that does not happen again. That is what accountability looks like. Not just saying sorry, but actually using my actions to demonstrating that I was sorry and that I continue to be sorry and that I'm trying to make amends every day by showing restraint in terms of being able to hold my anger so that I do not turn Green Hulk or Red Hulk or whatever the case be. Choose your poison. And then also accepting consequences. If I continue doing this, what I am going to be faced with is, once again, yes, some time in the cell, local county jail. That is going to happen. Probably I need to be arraigned. Probably I need to be arrested. Probably there needs to be a lawsuit. Probably there needs to be some more serious conversations, a divorce, child support, alimony, asset distribution, everything getting terminated from my job. And the last and least of the worries is therapy and getting branded an idiot for doing all that I did. So, accountability, taking concrete actions. Now, another thing that we all can do when we're talking how to move forward from abuse is we want to support the victims. You want to be able to build an ecosystem or have an ecosystem that supports the victims, people who are or who have been on the receiving end of all this abuse. Without excuses, without any blames, without any gaslighting, you just have to provide a space, a system where victims can flourish, can try to move on from that turbulent past or recent past. And they can try doing things to build on the life that they want or to get away from the life that they had and then build on what they want to build on. So at the very end, we always want to ensure that the work that abusers put in is not just dependent on the fact that whether or not I have been forgiven. No. Regardless, whether or not I've been forgiven, an abuser needs to put in the hard yards. An abuser needs to be held accountable. An abuser needs to go to therapy. An abuser needs to move on, taking concrete steps to make sure he or she does not do what he has been doing. There should not be any victim blaming. There should not be using therapy or sessions thereof as excuse to perpetuate that abuse. So that is something that needs to be done in an ongoing manner in order to move beyond that abuse. Now, one thing here we did forget, and I should have mentioned this right up front. When there is abuse, and I have seen this multiple times, and I have seen this not happen on every single occasion, be it in Pakistan, be it outside of Pakistan. At the first instance of physical abuse, let's just stick to physical abuse for now. You absolutely need to call law enforcement 911. State where you are, what happened. And no matter how much amount of love you get, respect you get, adoration you get, um, sympathy you get from abuser or relatives of that abuser, you absolutely need to make sure that abuser is put behind bars and he or she stays behind bars for at least a few nights. Why? Immediate accountability, instant gratification. We talk about instant gratification, right? So in this case, we're going to apply instant gratification as immediate accountability. You want to, boom, right off the bat, give that slap to the abuser, figurative slap, 911 slap, spending a few nights behind the lockup slap. You have to start there. Now, if it is verbal abuse, you see that red flag. What you want to do is you want to start noting those down. If you are in a position to document that, you absolutely need to make sure. If you are in a position to communicate to someone, you absolutely need to do that. Because this establishes trends, this establishes patterns of abuse. So you absolutely need to do this before we get down to all the steps that I have mentioned and so many other things that you may want to do or end up doing when dealing with abusers, abuser men, boys who were conditioned to perpetuate abuse because it is their right to be boys. Boys will be boys, like number 45 used to say, now number 47. So boys cannot be boys. Just because they're boys, they do not have the right to get physical, slap a woman, or abuse a woman, or even women don't have a right to physically assault or abuse men, or even mental abuse. So coming back to task at hand, call to action. How can we move forward from this point in time? It is duty of men and females in that ecosystem to stand up to the abusers. Now, one thing I'm going to say here, which a lot of our Desi people are not going to like, while all these things apply to everyone across the board, regardless of your ethnic background, religious background, this I'm going to mention specifically in context of subcontinental abusers. We deem our family respect more valuable than the life of our daughters. I mean, that's what I've seen. We're okay having our daughter killed or having our daughter butchered or beaten like crap. We're okay with that, but we're not okay with having our name spread out. Oh, so and so related to so and so just beat his wife. Oh my God, what a crazy world. Oh, are you getting beaten by your husband? No, we cannot do this. Maybe this generation is going to be better. Hopefully. I've seen evidence where I cannot say this, but hopefully this generation is going to be better, where we are going to put the lives and safety and security of our daughters and our sons above our so-called status. Or if I put this out there, if I call the cops, if I call 911, what is my street going to think of me? What is my neighborhood going to think of me? What is my community going to think of me? I'm not going to be able to go to parties for next 3 months because everyone's going to ask me questions. No, absolutely not. To hell with all the questions because people are going to talk. People are going to talk whether you're happy, whether you're sad, whether you broke, whether you win a lottery. It is people's job to talk. So the best thing you can do is to hell with people as long as you're not doing anything wrong, illegal, unethical, immoral, haram in the eyes of Allah Ta'ala. You continue moving forward in a straight line. And people, if they don't mind their own business, well, too bad for them. They can speak to the hand or a certain finger for that matter. So males and females within the family, within the circle, they need to be there. They need to stand up, and this thing has to be made visible. So the abuser ends up being isolated. We do not want to isolate the victim. We want to isolate the abuser. If the abuser gets high on money, you take his money away from him. If the abuser gets high on women, you take women away from him. If the abuser gets high on attention, you take attention away from him. If the abuser gets high on whatever, you take that away from them. We absolutely need to isolate abusers from whatever gets them high. And that is the only start we need to have in order to move forward to be able to face abusers, bullies in our domestic life, and move forward and show our kids that no, we are not going to take shit from anyone just because we are in a relationship with that person, especially when that relationship has turned physical in terms of abuse. Another very important aspect of this is, and this I want to mention in context of Muslims, we absolutely need to make mental health part of our curriculum, part of our community spaces, part of our conversations in our Islamic centers, part of our Sunday schools, part of our Friday sermons. There has to be a premium on this kind of conversation. We cannot expect to move forward unless and until we have these kind of conversations because sick people, they're not going to care about people's lives, people's livelihood, people's mentality, people's jobs. They're not going to think about that. So we absolutely need to have a very focused approach, a concerted effort from community leaders, not only leaders, but also community members in terms of making these conversations part of our community gatherings, community events. And then another thing, we absolutely need to make our men part of this conversation. This is not just a feminine conversation. This is a masculine conversation as much as it needs to be or has to be a feminine conversation. Because boys growing up, they will become fathers, they're brothers, they're going to become leaders in the community. Not to say that females will not, but as a leader of the household, there is so much at stake. Inspiration that is drawn from them, a father figure in the household, in the community, leadership in the community. You've got to have that inspiration. So you absolutely need to tell, we absolutely need to tell our kids when someone says no, you stop. When someone says, I do not want to have an argument about this, you stop. When someone says, no, I do not agree with this, unless they want to continue the argument, you stop. You don't just continue gaslighting that person. No, male or female. And I'm going to bring this all home with one very, very critical message. Guys, men, boys, they're not punching bags. Boys do cry. Boys can cry. Men do feel things. Men do get abused. Just because majority of abusers are men does not mean that men do not empathize. Men do not sympathize. Men do not have the perception, the visibility, the vision of how to deal with things. And another thing here is when a male friend of yours, a male brother-in-law of yours, of course, brother-in-law is going to be male. I mean, come on. When a male in your circle identifies a red flag, you've got to listen to that guy because a male knows what a male does. A male knows what a male thinks. A male knows how far a male will go. So you absolutely cannot discount that gut feeling coming from your male peers, your male colleagues, your male friends, your male relatives. If we are going to move forward dealing with abusers in our society, in our families, in our neighborhoods, in our workplace, we absolutely need to follow these steps. That was a lot, I think. I believe it was important, especially after the previous video where I kind of went through conditional conditioning over the course of decades at the hands of women and the kind of feedback I received. So it was important for me to have this session just so that we could lay it all out here. When it comes to mental health, how that impacts, how we need to move forward, and how males need to be made part of this equation. But the conversation does not stop here. I will be bringing more conversations, not just monologues. I will be talking to a few people, and you will be seeing those in coming days and weeks as I continue this journey, this venture of men's mental health, because high time, we need to start doing things the right way, the right things the right way so that we can impact the health, physical and mental health of our males, which subsequently impacts lives of our families moving forward. So if you liked anything that I did bring forth today, please do leave a comment. If you did not like anything I said, definitely I want to hear about it. And what can be done? What is one thing that you took away from today's conversation? I really do want to know if there was anything that you took away from today's conversation with me, myself, and I, Umer Khan. Do identify that. Do like, comment, subscribe, and let's talk. Let's talk mental health. Boys do cry. Whoever told you that boys don't cry, lied. They were hiding something. Maybe it was some pain, maybe it was some trauma, maybe it was self-respect, maybe it was ego, maybe it was cultural pressures, maybe it was the need to get validation from their elders, maybe it was just to maintain a facade. But yes, boys do cry. It is perfectly fine to cry. It only makes us human at the very heart of things. With that, till next time, take very good care of yourselves. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.